The words left the old man's mouth like a whip crack across the dry evening air. "You can choose any of my daughters for marriage, Apache. They're a burden to me, but you'll have to pay." Silence followed. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. The Apache warrior, tall and broad-shouldered with sun-darkened skin and eyes as deep as storm clouds, said nothing. His name was Tajan, and behind those eyes burned a quiet fury, not for the insult, but for what he saw standing behind the father's slumped figure. 3 women, their faces pale from years of fear, neglect, and shame. The eldest stepped forward, her hands rough from work, her face lined not by age but by endurance. Evelyn, 30, the one townsfolk whispered about, too old, too proud, too ruined. Her eyes met Tajan's without flinching. It wasn't beauty that caught his attention. It was something rarer, defiance, a spark that refused to die. They stood outside Dust Creek, a half-starved settlement clinging to the edge of the desert, where hunger and pride often wrestled till one gave way. Evelyn's father, Harold Boone, a once wealthy rancher turned bitter gambler, was trying to pay his debts, and if that meant selling his daughters, so be it. "You're not selling me," Evelyn said sharply, her voice trembling only at the edges. Her father spat. "You'll do as you're told. This is a man's deal, girl." Tajan turned his head slowly. His braids hung over his bare shoulders, adorned with turquoise beads. "I do not buy women," he said quietly. "Then you'd best move along," Harold grunted. "I got mouths to get rid of, not feed." The man's cruelty struck the air like dust against sunlight. Tajan studied the woman again, the way she stood between her sisters, shielding them like a lioness guarding her cubs. He'd seen that same fire in the eyes of warriors who refused to surrender even when outnumbered. That night, the wind rose over Dust Creek. Tajan camped near the river bend, his horse grazing in the silver grass. But he couldn't forget her face or her words. And neither could Evelyn, sitting in the cabin's corner, listening to her father mutter drunken curses about debts and shame. She looked at her hands, at the scars life had given her, then at the open window where moonlight poured in. Somewhere out there was the Apache, the man her father tried to sell her to, and the only one who hadn't looked at her with pity. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. A group of men were coming, the debt collectors from San Mesa, and Harold Boone had nothing left to pay, except his daughters. By the time the sun rose over Dust Creek, the ground itself seemed to tremble. 6 riders approached from the east, their horses kicking up clouds of red dust. The lead man wore a black coat despite the heat, Gabe Mallory, a collector for the San Mesa gang. He wasn't there for cattle or cards. He was there for fleshland, or blood, whichever settled the debt fastest. Inside the Boone cabin, Evelyn was tending to the dying embers in the stove when she heard the hooves. Her father stumbled from his chair, already sweating, muttering curses under his breath. "They came early," he hissed, reaching for the half-empty whiskey bottle. "Damn those vultures." Her younger sisters froze at the sound. Lydia, the middle one, whispered, "Pa." "What'll you do?" "What I have to," he growled, pulling on his torn vest. "You girls best keep quiet and look pretty." Evelyn stood between him and the door. "You can't hand us over to them." He turned, his bloodshot eyes narrowing. "You think you got a choice? Ain't no one coming to save you, Evie. Not that Apache, not anyone. You'll do what's needed, or they'll burn this place down." Outside, the riders halted. Dust settled around them like smoke after a gunfight. Gabe dismounted and tied his reins, brushing his long coat aside to reveal the glint of a revolver. He smiled, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Morning, Harold," Gabe called. "Beautiful day to clear some debt, ain't it?" Harold Boone stepped out onto the porch, his hands shaking slightly. I just need a little more time. Gabe tilted his head. You said that 3 times already. You got something new to offer? Evelyn watched through the window. She could see her father's desperation. It clung to him like sweat. She also saw Gabe's men, cruel, hollow-eyed, smelling of whiskey and dust. Her stomach twisted as one of them stared straight at the cabin, licking his lips. I got daughters, Harold blurted suddenly. Strong ones. Can work, cook, clean. You could take 1, maybe 2. Just let me keep the ranch. Evelyn's world stopped. The air in her lungs turned to stone. Lydia gasped beside her. He can't. But he could. And he did. Gabe's smile widened. You offering your girls, Boone? Hell, I didn't take you for a man of trade. He spat into the dirt, then motioned to his men. Bring 'em out. Let's take a look. Evelyn stepped through the door before anyone could grab her sisters. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her voice was steady. You'll have to go through me first. Gabe's gaze ran over her. You're the oldest, ain't you? 30 or close to it. Bit old for our taste. He chuckled. But maybe we can find a use for you. Before Harold could speak, the sound of a horse echoed from the canyon. One rider, fast. Dust trailed behind him like smoke from a fuse. Evelyn turned her head. Hope flickering for a moment, she didn't dare believe Tazihan. He rode hard and silent, his long black hair whipping behind him, the morning sun glinting off the turquoise at his neck. He didn't shout or threaten. He simply arrived, and every man on that porch felt the shift in the wind. Gabe squinted. Who the hell's this? Tazian reined in his horse, his dark eyes fixed on Evelyn, then on her father. You made an offer, he said flatly. You said I could choose one. Gabe laughed harshly. You one of Boone's drinking debts too? Tazian's stare didn't move. You said they were burden, he said to Harold. But I see only chains. Then, with one motion quicker than breath, Tazian swung from his horse, his tomahawk gleaming in the morning light. Gabe's hand went for his gun, but he never drew it. Tazian's blade buried itself in the post beside Gabe's head, the wood splitting with a violent crack. The message was clear. No one moved. Even the horses went still. Tazian turned to Evelyn. You are not for sale, he said quietly, his voice carrying more weight than thunder. For the first time in her life, Evelyn felt seen, not as a debt, not as a burden, but as a person, and as Gabe's men slowly backed off, muttering under their breath. The dust of Dust Creek swirled once more around them, thick, golden, and trembling, as if the desert itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what the warrior and the woman would do next. When the dust finally settled, the only sound left was the restless snort of the horses and the slow creak of the windmill turning behind the Boone cabin. Gabe Mallory's men, cowed and trembling, backed away under Tazian's unflinching stare. They weren't used to being challenged, least of all by a man they considered less than themselves. Evelyn stood beside the porch rail, her fingers clutching the wood so tightly her knuckles turned white. The morning sun spilled over the horizon, bathing the scene in a molten light. Her father, Harold, glared at her with drunken fury and shame. You think this savage saved you? He barked. He'll drag you off and do worse than I ever could. Tazian turned, his voice calm but edged with warning. Your words are poison, old man. You should be thankful your debts left you breathing. Harold spat into the dirt, but said nothing more. His pride, like his life, had rotted from within. Evelyn's heart pounded as Tazian walked toward her, his footsteps silent despite his size. He stopped just a few feet away. You cannot stay here, he said simply. I can't just leave, she whispered. My sisters. Tazian's gaze softened. They are safer without you now. The debt is broken. He will not sell them again, not while I live. She looked past him, to where Gabe Mallory's riders were disappearing into the horizon, their pride wounded, their vengeance brewing. "They'll come back," she murmured. He nodded. "Then we ride before they do." Without another word, Tarzan walked to his horse, a strong, black stallion with a streak of white down its nose. He untied the reins and looked back at her, eyes unreadable. "You can stay and die for a man who traded your life for whiskey," he said quietly. "Or you can come and live your own." Evelyn's chest ached. She turned to see her father again, standing in the doorway, bottle in hand, too proud to beg, too broken to change. Her sisters stood behind him, their faces pale, watching. Lydia mouthed. "Go." Evelyn took a breath that felt like breaking a chain, then stepped off the porch. Tarzan helped her mount his horse behind him, and together they rode into the rising sun. The land stretched out before them, endless sand, red rock cliffs, and the shimmer of heat waves twisting above the ground. The wind tugged at her hair as the town of Dust Creek grew smaller behind them. Swallowed by distance and dust, for the first time in her life, Evelyn felt the weight of silence, not the heavy kind that came from fear, but a clean, wild silence. She clung to the warrior's back, her hands resting lightly against the warm strength of his chest. They rode until noon, when the desert sun blazed white and merciless. At last, Tarzan slowed near a narrow canyon where a thin stream wound between the rocks. "We rest here," he said. "Dismount. Evelyn slid down clumsily, her dress catching on the saddle horn. Tarzan steadied her without a word. The touch of his hand was gentle, surprisingly careful for a man who carried weapons and scars. She knelt by the stream, cupping water in her hands. It was cool, sweeter than any she'd tasted. For a moment, she forgot the pain of her home, the shame of her father's bargain. Tarzan crouched nearby, washing the dust from his arms. "You are not like your father," he said. She smiled faintly. "That's the kindest thing anyone's ever told me." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You are stronger than him." "Stronger than most." Her chest tightened. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he said simply. "You stood before men who would have killed you. That tells me what I need to know." A shadow crossed the sun then, a hawk circling high above. Tarzan's gaze followed it, his jaw tightening. "They will come again," he murmured. "Gabe Mallory doesn't forget shame. He'll follow." Evelyn's stomach turned cold. "What will we do?" Tarzan stood, water dripping from his hands. "We ride south," he said, "to the canyon of red stone. My people once lived there. It's safe." She hesitated, glancing back at the trail they'd left. "I never thought freedom would look like this," she said softly. Tarzan mounted his horse and extended a hand to her. "Freedom always begins with leaving something behind." She took his hand. The warmth of his palm grounded her as she climbed up behind him again. The desert wind picked up, swirling around them like ghosts of a past they were both trying to escape as the sun sank low. Painting the sky in blood and gold, they disappeared into the heart of the desert, two outcasts bound by choice. Not by trade. And somewhere far behind them, in the fading light of Dust Creek, a dark figure watched from the ridge, Gabe Mallory, his eyes burning with vengeance. By dusk, the land had turned crimson under the dying sun. The desert seemed endless, yet Tarzan rode with purpose, his dark eyes fixed on the jagged cliffs ahead. Evelyn, sitting behind him, could barely keep her eyes open. Her body ached, her lips cracked from thirst, but she didn't complain. The wind carried the scent of dust and sagebrush, mingling with the faint smoke of fires from faraway camps. When they finally reached the canyon, she saw it, Redstone Canyon, a place of haunting beauty. Towering cliffs rose around them like ancient walls, painted in shades of rust, gold, and blood. The air felt cooler here, alive with echoes. The sound of their horses' hooves bounced off the canyon's face, blending with the whisper of the wind. Tarzan slowed his horse. "This is where my mother's people lived," he said quietly, "before the soldiers came." Evelyn looked around. Scattered stones marked where homes might have once stood, circular outlines of hearths, fragments of pottery half buried in sand. "It's beautiful," she said softly. He dismounted and offered his hand. She slid off carefully, her boots crunching over the gravel. For a moment, they stood together, silent under the vast sky turning purple and gold. Tarzan led her toward a small cave tucked between two tall cliffs. Inside was a natural shelter, dry, shaded, and hidden. He dropped his saddlebag and began gathering dry twigs for a fire. Evelyn knelt beside him, helping without being asked. They worked in silence, their hands brushing once, and though neither spoke of it, the air between them seemed to hum with unspoken things. When the fire finally came alive, its orange light painted their faces with warmth and shadows. Evelyn hugged her knees, watching the flames. "You said your mother's people lived here. What happened to them?" Tarzan's jaw tightened. "The army came. They said we must leave, that the land was not ours." He stared into the fire. "Some left. Some fought. My mother was among those who fought." She swallowed, her voice gentle. "And you?" "I was a boy," he said. "Too young to fight. Too old to forget." The flames crackled between them. Evelyn felt the heaviness in his words, a grief carved deep like the canyon itself. "I lost my mother too," she whispered. "She died when I was 12. My father changed after that. There was nothing left in him but anger and cards." Tarzan looked at her, his expression softening. "Anger eats the soul if you feed it too long." She nodded, tears glistening in the firelight. "I know." Outside, the wind moaned through the canyon like a ghostly song. Somewhere, a coyote howled, long and low. Evelyn shivered. "Do you think they'll follow us here?" He glanced toward the entrance. "Gabe Mallory will not forget being shamed by a native man. He will come." Evelyn's voice trembled. "Then we should keep moving." "Not tonight," he said. "The desert kills at night. We stay until dawn." He tossed another log into the fire, the sparks rising like stars. Evelyn leaned back against the rock wall, exhaustion tugging at her. "How do you live like this?" she asked quietly. "So far from everything?" Tarzan's lips curved slightly. "Everything is here," he said. "The wind, the fire, the earth that remembers." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound like freedom." He looked at her, his voice low. "It is." The night deepened, painting the canyon in silver. The moon climbed high, spilling light through the narrow crevice above the cave. Evelyn dozed for a moment, then stirred when she heard a sound, faint, distant, like metal striking stone. Tarzan rose instantly, his muscles tensing. His hand went to the tomahawk at his belt. "What is it?" She whispered that. He moved to the entrance, listening. The night air was still for a moment, then came the faint whinny of a horse. 2, maybe 3. "They found us," he murmured. Evelyn's heart jumped. "Gabe? Most likely." He turned back toward her. "Take the saddlebag and go behind the rocks. Stay low. If I fall, you run." Her breath caught. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I won't leave you." He met her eyes, steady, calm, but fierce. "Then don't let them see you." Outside, the shadows moved against the canyon walls, dark shapes slipping between moonlit stone. The firelight flickered across Tarzan's face, casting sharp lines over his muscles, his tribal jewelry glinting like warning signs in the dark. Evelyn pressed herself against the cave wall, her heart hammering. She wanted to scream, to run, but she couldn't look away as Tarzan stepped into the open. Tomahawk in one hand, knife in the other, facing the night alone. The first gunshot echoed across Redstone Canyon, shattering the silence, and the desert remembered blood again. The night in Redstone Canyon had turned cold and brittle. The moon hung like a pale eye above the cliffs, watching everything unfold below. Evelyn crouched behind the rocks, clutching the saddlebag to her chest, her breath trembling in the silence. The fire had died down to glowing embers, casting faint red light over the warrior who stood alone in the canyon mouth. Tajan, unmoving, his silhouette carved against the stone like something born of the desert itself. Then came the sound again, hooves, slow and deliberate. Voices drifted through the canyon, spread out. Someone barked. "He's here somewhere." Gabe Mallory. Evelyn felt the name like poison. She peered out just enough to see him. Black coat glinting in the moonlight, revolver drawn, a smirk cutting across his face. Behind him rode 3 armed men, their rifles resting on their shoulders. Tajan's voice rang out suddenly, low and firm. "You should not have come." The men froze, scanning the rocks. Gabe laughed. "There he is, the savage with a hero's heart." His voice dripped contempt. "You think you can shame me and live?" Tajan stepped forward into the moonlight. He stood bare-chested, his bronze skin catching silver reflections. Feathers and turquoise beads moved faintly with the wind in his long black hair. "I did not shame you," he said. "You did that yourself?" Gabe's eyes narrowed. "You took what wasn't yours. That woman belongs to her father, and her father belongs to me." "She belongs to no man," Tajan said. A tense stillness fell, as if even the rocks were listening. Then a shot. The bullet sparked off the stone near Tajan's head. Evelyn gasped and ducked, her heart pounding so loud she could hear it echo in her ears. But Tajan didn't flinch. He moved fast, impossibly fast, diving behind a boulder, a blur of movement as he drew his knife and tomahawk. The next shot missed again. Dust exploded into the air. Tajan vanished into the shadows, fan out. Gabe shouted, cocking his gun, "Find him!" The canyon swallowed the men's footsteps. The night wind moaned through the cliffs like a warning. Evelyn crept lower, her fingers gripping the rock until they ached. She saw Tajan's silhouette glide between stones, silent, precise. He was hunting now. A scream cut the air, short and sharp. One of Gabe's men dropped from a ledge, his rifle clattering beside him, blood darkening the sand. "Jesse!" Another yelled, firing wildly into the darkness. The flash lit the canyon for an instant, and in that instant, Evelyn saw Tajan leap from the shadows, his tomahawk slicing through the moonlight. The man fell without another sound. "Savage!" Gabe roared. "I'll gut you myself." He fired again, the shot grazing Tajan's shoulder. The warrior staggered but didn't stop. Blood gleamed on his skin like molten copper. Evelyn couldn't stay hidden any longer. She grabbed the saddlebag and crawled out from behind the rocks, her mind screaming against her fear. Inside the bag, she remembered Tajan's bow, wrapped in cloth. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free, then the arrows. "Tajan!" She shouted. He turned just in time to catch the bow she threw. Their eyes met, a spark of understanding, wordless and wild. Gabe raised his revolver. "Both of you died tonight." Tajan drew the arrow in one smooth motion, the string humming under his fingers. The arrow flew before Gabe could blink. It struck his gun hand, sending the revolver spinning into the dirt. Gabe howled in pain, clutching his bleeding wrist, but one of his men had crept behind Tajan. Evelyn saw it before he did, the glint of a knife in the moonlight. "Tajan!" She screamed. He turned, but not fast enough. The knife slashed across his ribs. He grunted, dropping to one knee, blood dark and wet against his skin. Without thinking, Evelyn grabbed a fallen rifle and fired. The shot echoed through the canyon, deafening. The attacker fell backward, dead before he hit the ground. The silence afterward was deafening. Only the crackle of the dying fire and the sound of shallow breathing remained. Gabe Mallory stumbled backward, eyes wide with fury and disbelief. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "Both of you." He turned and mounted his horse, galloping into the darkness, leaving his dead behind. Evelyn ran to Tajian, dropping beside him. "You're bleeding," she cried, pressing her hands to the wound. He grimaced but met her eyes, calm even in pain. "You did well," he said softly. "You fought with heart." Tears stung her eyes. "You saved me. I wasn't going to let them take you too." He smiled faintly. "Then we are even." The fire flickered weakly between them as she tore a strip from her dress and pressed it against his wound. The desert wind carried away the smoke, the scent of blood, and the last echoes of gunfire died in the stillness that followed. Evelyn realized something. She had come into this canyon as a woman running from her father's shame. She would leave it as something entirely different, a woman who had finally fought for her own life, and as Tajian's hand brushed hers, the red cliffs around them seemed to glow again, not with fire, but with hope. The storm came fast across the desert, rolling over the horizon like a dark animal. The wind howled through the canyon walls, carrying the smell of rain and dust. Evelyn clutched her shawl tighter as she stood on the porch of the cabin, her eyes searching the distance for him. Koa. He had gone hours ago to speak with the men who wanted her back, the men her father had sold her to. Every flash of lightning carved the world in silver, revealing the empty valley below. Then, through the downpour, she saw him. Koa's figure emerged, a dark silhouette against the storm. His long black hair was soaked, plastered against his chest, tribal jewelry glinting in the lightning. He carried something in his hands, a torn piece of parchment. Her father's mark burned into it. When he reached her, his chest heaved with exhaustion, and his voice broke the roar of rain. "It's done," he said. "You're free of his debt." Evelyn's breath caught. "Free? How? What did you do?" Koa looked away for a long moment, the firelight from the cabin door reflecting in his eyes. "Your father won't sell you again. But his men, they will come." She stepped closer, her trembling hand brushing his arm, feeling the tension beneath his skin. "You fought them, didn't you?" His jaw tightened. "They gave me no choice." The storm cracked open above them, thunder booming like cannon fire. Evelyn stared at him, fear mixing with something else, something like awe. "Then we have to leave, tonight." Koa's gaze drifted to the horizon. "If we run, they'll follow. They'll burn this place to the ground." Evelyn turned back toward the small cabin, the table they built together, the blanket she'd mended for him, the quiet nights by the fire when neither spoke but everything was understood. "Then let them," she whispered. "There's nothing here worth dying for anymore." But Koa's face said otherwise. "There is," he murmured. His dark eyes softened as he looked at her. "You." Lightning split the sky again, and the moment hung between them, fragile, alive, dangerous. She wanted to tell him that she'd rather die beside him than return to the life she'd been sold into, but words faltered. Instead, she took his hand. "Men stay," she said. "If the storm's coming, let's face it together." Koa's breath shuddered. The Apache warrior who had faced bullets and betrayal, who had survived every cruelty of the frontier, now stood uncertain before the quiet strength of a woman who had lost everything but her will. "You don't understand what this means," he said. "If they find me here, they won't just kill me. They'll make an example of you." "I'm not afraid anymore," Evelyn whispered. "You taught me that." A rumble echoed through the canyon. Horses. Men shouting over the rain. Koa turned sharply, his muscles tightening like drawn rope. "They're here." He moved fast, grabbing his rifle, checking the edge of his knife. Evelyn followed, her heart pounding as she doused the lanterns. The cabin fell into shadow. Through the slats of the window, torchlight flickered below, growing brighter. "They're many," she breathed. Koa nodded. "But they don't know this land like I do." He guided her toward the back door, where the desert opened into narrow ravines and slick stone trails. "We can make it to the river by dawn," he said. "If we're lucky." The storm screamed as they stepped into the night. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the two of them, the warrior and the woman who had once been a burden, now bound by choice and defiance as they disappeared into the wild darkness. Evelyn looked back one last time at the cabin. Smoke rose where a torch had landed on the roof. It caught fast, the flames hungrily devouring the only home she'd known. She turned her face into the rain and squeezed Koa's hand. "Let it burn," she whispered and through the firelight and thunder. Koa led her into the canyon's heart, toward freedom or death, whichever would come first. The rain had eased by dawn, leaving the desert wrapped in mist. The smell of wet earth clung to the air, and every rock glistened like silver under the first light. Koa and Evelyn crouched behind a jagged wall of red stone, breaths shallow, clothes soaked, their bodies trembling from the long night. They had run until the storm drowned the sound of their pursuers. But now the silence was worse. Evelyn pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart hammer beneath her soaked dress. "Do you think they lost us?" she whispered. Koa's dark eyes scanned the valley below. His long black hair hung wet against his back, beads and feathers from his tribal jewelry glinting faintly in the sunrise. "No," he said quietly. "They're still out there. Men like that don't give up when they've been shamed." She swallowed hard. "We can't keep running forever." He turned to her then, his face calm but filled with something deeper, a quiet, unbreakable resolve. "I know." Evelyn saw the change in his expression before he even spoke again, and fear twisted inside her. "Koa, what are you planning?" He brushed his thumb across her cheek, wiping away the trail of dirt and tears. "You'll take the river path. It'll lead you east, toward the trading post. There's a woman there, Nora. She owes me her life. Tell her my name and she'll hide you." Her voice cracked. "And you?" Koa smiled faintly, the kind of smile that broke her heart more than anger ever could. "I'll stay." "And this?" Evelyn shook her head, clutching his arm. "No. You can't fight them all." He didn't answer, only looked past her to where smoke still rose faintly from the horizon. The cabin, their home, now ashes in the sand. "It took enough from you. They won't take you again." Tears blurred her vision. "Then let me fight beside you." Koa leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm despite the cold morning air. "You fought enough for one life, Evelyn." For a long moment, they stayed like that, the world holding its breath around them. Then Koa rose, pulling his knife from his belt and checking the rifle strapped to his back. The rising sun cast fire across his skin, highlighting the scars that told his story, each one carved by survival, by loss, by defiance. Evelyn grabbed his hand. "Koa, please." He looked down at her with that same calm strength. "If I don't come back, follow the river until you see the stone that looks like a wolf's head. Keep walking east. Don't stop." Before she could speak again, he kissed her gentle, firm final. Then he turned, vanishing into the mist. The moments that followed stretched into an eternity. Evelyn crouched in the shadow of the rocks, praying, listening. Then the gunfire began. Sharp cracks echoed through the canyon, mixed with the war cries of men and the haunting echoes of Koa's defiant yell. Birds scattered into the sky, startled by the violence breaking the morning calm. Evelyn covered her mouth, trembling, as the sounds grew closer, louder, and then silence. The mist thickened. The wind carried only the faint hiss of the river. Evelyn waited until she could bear it no longer, then stumbled toward the sound of the gunfire, her bare feet sinking into the wet sand. When she reached the clearing, her breath caught. Koa lay at the center, surrounded by fallen men. His chest rose and fell faintly, his long black hair spread across the blood-stained earth. His hand still clutched his knife, and beside him, a broken rifle. The dawn painted his skin gold, as if the heavens refused to let him fade in shadow. Evelyn fell to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against his face. "Koa, please, stay with me." His eyes fluttered open, dark and endless. "You made it," he whispered, his voice a rasp. "That's enough." "No," she sobbed. "We were supposed to be free together." He smiled weakly. "You are." Then his gaze drifted toward the rising sun, and he was still. Evelyn held him as the day broke over the canyon, her cries swallowed by the wind. The desert stretched wide and silent, but it no longer felt empty. Later, when she finally rose, she took his necklace, turquoise and bone, worn smooth from years of life and battle, and tied it around her wrist. She walked east, just as he'd told her, never looking back. And behind her, the wind swept through the red stones, carrying the faint echo of a warrior's song, the song of Koa, who had chosen love over survival, and in doing so, had found a freedom no man could take.